Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Colthus back again with another logic video, and today we're going to be discussing the action recorder and all the various features which have been added to it since, well, the update's kind of old now, but since updated it, it's gotten a little bit better than when Dreams started out. So let's get down to business. You can easily find the action recorder in the Animate tab. This is the action recorder. And if you want to read information about it, you can just hover the imp over it. Press X on next page to read everything. And there's also a video about it, I guess, but personally, I advise you watch mine because it was made by me. Alright, first thing to talk about. There's this basic setting called Action Mode, and when you press R2 on something, it begins to record. Although if you let go of R2, it'll stop recording, so keep that in mind. And it's a little jittery because it's based off the motion controls of your controller. And we'll press L1 and square to take a look at these settings in here. You can set it to ping pong mode, where it will go back and forth, which would be ideal if you're making like an enemy that's got to go back and forth on a simple path. You can also set it to sustain, which basically means it will play out and then stop. As long as power is active, it will play out the animation. Then there's play once, where it will play once and then stop, regardless of whether power is applied. And there's loop, of course, which you've already know. You can use these settings right here. If you press X and drag this, you can increase the animation speed. L1 and square allows you to set the exact animation speed. And triangle resets it to its basic standard. And you can also make negative speed, which basically just equates to 0, but, you know, if you want to go really slow, that works. And here you'll see the amplification feature, which increases the pattern. Just amplifies it, basically. You can also de-amplify, which will decrease the pattern, making it shorter. And there's springiness, which just kind of makes it a little more wobbly. It doesn't really work very... I mean, you'll notice it's kind of like jittering around a bit on the path. Sometimes helps if you want to make animations more natural. But that's the most basic setting of the action recorder. Now, if I set this thing to movable... Well, just a sec. Let me demonstrate something. Turn off movability. We're going to get rid of this real quick. But if we go in here, open up the settings, and press X, you'll notice that it moved a bit. That's because it's actually recording an action. And I'll show you how to, if you want to move back this playhead back to the beginning, just press previous footage. Or you can use the arrow to scroll backwards, but previous footage will do it quicker. You can also move the playhead forward using the scroll forward method. It's not highly necessary in this particular case, but I'll show you what I mean. If we press X, this will become movable. And we just recorded a session of it being movable. And the interesting thing about it is, if you set it to play once, let it end, it is now immovable now that the animation is finished playing. So this would be kind of interesting if you want to do falling rocks and then have them become static. That's one way you can do it. Or if you just want to you know, a dynamic object to settle in a position that you want and not move. But that's pretty much the basics of the action recorder. There's another mode called possession mode, and basically this just allows you to possess a puppet, which I will demonstrate, but let's make sure all the settings are correct before I do so. We're going to need circle in order to depossess. Alright, everything's good. Let's go down business. And we're possessing him. And we can just press circle to depossess and save the animation. And you'll notice these here, these little things, I haven't really talked about them much, but they are universal to the action recorder. There's reverse, travel, which basically means it'll start to travel outside the border. I'll explain that in a minute. And keep changes. And basically, keep changes will maintain the last frame of the animation or maintain the position of the puppet when it is finished being possessed. I'll show you. Set it to play once. And he'll stop right there. However, if you set it to loop, or let's put it on sustain instead. Set it to sustain. Turn off keep changes. We'll just set it to sustain and let it play out. Turn off keep changes. You'll notice he zips back to his original position. So keep changes is good if you want a puppet to travel somewhere and then stop there. And travel basically just makes it so that he'll restart from a new position once he's reached the end point. It's a little glitchy in this enclosed space, but that is the general gist of it. Keep changes is probably a little better if you want to set it to travel, because he'll be a little more natural about it. It's better for an open plane, like if you just want something to wander around. You can also decrease the amplification, which might help. Although he's going to turn funny if you do that, so keep that in mind. And you can increase the speed if you want. Wow, he's really zipping around. This would be great if you want to make like an SCP game or something. Or maybe that one episode of Star Trek where the people are accelerated. Anyway, that's how possession, works on the action recorder. Something to note is that there's actually a regular record possession feature. And you may be wondering, well, what's the difference? I think that the action recorder has a few more options. I'm not exactly certain what's the difference between it and the other method. Both of them work pretty the same. I actually prefer the old record possession method most of the time because it seems to be a little better at movement, but I could be wrong about that. But as far as I know, they're mostly the same. Maybe one is just more efficient. This one's probably more efficient. Anyway, now we're going to get down to the real meat of the subject, which is keyframe mode, and my personal favorite out of all the modes. Now, if you set keyframe mode on with X, you'll notice that there's multiple settings over here. Blending off, blending on, and blending off, I'll demonstrate in a minute, but let's just get an animation so that we can test this. Oh, first thing you're going to want whenever you create an animation is just take R2 and create the basic stance that you want the puppet to start out with. And slightly move things a bit, because you'll get some odd effects. I'll demonstrate real quick. Let me turn this off and show you what I mean by odd effects. If you move the hands, it'll kind of only pay attention to what you move. So if you try to, like, you know, move this part, you notice how it's not moving the rest of him anymore. It's like holding this part in place. So it's best to start out at the core joints, like pelvis, move upward to belly, slightly move it, move upward to chest, move upward to throat, move upward to head, and move outward like that. That way, if you want to make a future frame and move his arms around, it's a little easier. Just don't move it too much, otherwise it'll look weird and janky. Now we're going to move the playhead forward a little bit, and this is going to create a new frame in the animation. Oops. And we can turn off precise move. You can just use L2 if you want to rotate things, and R2 if you want to like grab them and move them about. L2 is pretty good though for moving them around, I think. And if you make any mistakes, just press the backwards arrow, you know, on the D-pad. I should say the left arrow. And we'll make another frame of this animation. And we'll make another one, return him to his basic position, sort of. And you could preview it by pressing scroll backwards or scroll forwards. That's our animation. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you record an animation, you want all the basic stances from the very beginning. You'll notice that the right hand stance, we don't actually have a bar here inside. I'll explain a little better. Press L1 and X to get inside this menu. This is basically showing you all the frames we've recorded. And there's an absent one for the right hand. So if we move the playhead back to previous footage, you'll notice that there's no indication that the hand has an animation. This kind of, you know, texture that tends to be on there. So if we just press, you know, L2 on there, you'll now notice that those frames are filled in. You'll also notice these little gaps. That's because we're not manipulating, even though there's a frame here that controls the arms, there's none for the right hand at this segment. Sometimes you'll actually want all of these things to be moved. So like, for instance, if I wanted them to be here, I'll try to give an example later, but let's for now just take a look at how it is in play. And if you want to copy these, it's as simple as just press X, drag, at least hold X, I should say, and drag this, and then just press L1 and R2 to copy and move them ahead on the play thing, you know, with the imp, I should say. Move them ahead on the timeline. And you'll notice these little white bits here. That's because there's no smoothing. So if you double tap, you can select all of these and put smoothing on. You can also get rid of all the footage with this if you want to. And you can retake the footage And of course there's the blend type, which we'll talk about later. But for now, let's just let our animation play out and take a look at it. And of course we can mess with the speed, just like before. And the springiness, which is going to cause a lot of strangeness in this case. Springiness is more useful though if you want to make something look natural. Occasionally it makes it look better to have springiness, you know, they kind of move a little more wonky, they're not as precise and robotic as they normally would be. So springiness can be useful, keep it in mind when you're making animations. We can also amplify, which will just make the animations we've recorded go further out, which just kind of results in him looking really strange. Or we can decrease it to where he's barely moving at all. But yeah, that's pretty much, you know, all there is to say on normal keyframe mode on the action recorder. But I want to show you something. Something else. I guess we could copy this. Let's copy this. Now we've got the base frame, so let's go ahead and delete these by dragging and then pressing triangle on them all. We're also going to turn this off so it doesn't interfere with what we're doing. But say if you wanted him to fall down, I'll demonstrate. And we'll move the playhead a little further. Pull the legs down with R2. Anyway, that's our animation. I'm going to make it a little quicker. But I'm also going to put it on a timeline to demonstrate something. We're going to set the timeline to sustain. And say you wanted him to, you know, be permanently stuck on the ground. We're going to drag the timeline back a bit so that it ends with him, you know, being on the ground. And I'm going to plug in a switch to show this off. This is the best way. If you have something set to sustain, it'll be constantly on, and it will remain at the end of the timeline, basically pausing the animation in that position. So that's a good way if you want to permanently pause the animation. However, say you want him to get back up after he falls down. And say you want to copy this animation, you know, of him being down on the floor. So we're going to copy it, move it ahead. And this isn't really going to look natural, but we're going to copy the beginning animation and pull it forward so that it'll get back up later. Now let's take a look at what this would look like. Alright, this is the foot animation. Let's label it that so that we can tell the difference. And we can set this to loop because it won't really affect it. Let's make it really long though. Let's say we wanted him to stay on the floor for a very long time. You'll notice he kind of moves around and slowly gets back up, which is a little strange. And this isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes it can look very natural. But what if I want him to remain perfectly still until he gets back up? Well, it's very simple. Go to this frame, and you'll notice these little gaps here. fill in all of those gaps. Just make sure you touch every area that you recorded in the base animation over again in this position. At least in this playhead position, I should say. So we're just going to touch every area until it's all filled out. And we're going to delete this. And I'm going to demonstrate another interesting quirk of this action recorder. You'll notice he's still doing that weird kind of wobbly movement. You're probably wondering, why is he doing that, Jimmy? I don't entirely know why, but here's how you stabilize it. You just copy this really close, and then you pull this ahead, and there you go. Just copy them twice. I don't know why this little gap gets rid of the weird wobbliness, but it does. See, perfectly still until he has to get up again. So if you want to get rid of that problem, that's how I do it. I guess it helps blend the animation for the recorder. I'm not exactly sure of the logistics of it, but it's interesting and it helps with this sort of thing. So, yeah. Now, I guess we could talk about some other things that are in the action recorder settings. For instance, end on trigger. I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's go ahead and say that this animation... Well, we could put it on a... Say that this animation plays out, and then you want it to do something, like turn on a switch, say. You can go in here and go to end on trigger, or on trigger end. Connect it to a counter, and then connect it to a destroyer. Like, say if you wanted an enemy to disappear once the animation is done. It probably would be better if we didn't have this. We'll just delete that get back up part and have it end on him falling. There he goes, dead enemy. So I just thought I'd mention that real quick before we move on to some other things. We've already got this dancing animation here. What would happen if we put it to... let's go ahead and delete this end part and record every single frame. I want to demonstrate how it would be if we set it to stay. Oops, made a mistake. A very novice mistake, but a mistake. You'll notice that those animations were kind of overlapping. That's why previous footage is good. It makes sure that there's no overlap whatsoever. Alright, now we're in position and we're going to record all these various frames that we want. Till it's all filled in. Alright, what's that one there? Neck. Alright, now it's filled in. So what happens if we set it to keep changes? And if we set it to play once? Well, first we gotta reverse it, of course. Actually, it doesn't really do anything. I think it's because the puppet... If you do it with objects, they'll remain in place, but with the puppet, it's different. So it's probably just better to set it to, you know, use the sustain timeline method that I showed earlier, rather than, you know, using the keep changes method. It doesn't seem to work that well. And again, you do need to keep constant power into the timeline, but, you know, it's probably a little bit more simple than the other solution. Anyway, let's go back. And let's copy out this end part again. And we're going to talk about the other settings that are in here, the other blend types, which I mentioned earlier. The current blend type is linear, which is what these straight lines are, but you can also press X to set it to a different type, which is curve, I think. Now, there's not a massive difference that's visible, but it does change his movement if you notice ever so slightly. It's kind of more eased out. There's also the opposite, which I guess is more, you know, adds more emphasis to the high points of the animation. I don't tend to use these very much, but if you're like an animation, you know, savant or whatever, you know, someone who's really into that, you'll probably use it. There's also this weird wiggly one. Very odd. Now the final one that I think is interesting is the no blend type, and that basically looks like this, which might be good if you're doing stop motion. Speaking of stop motion, if you're interested in how the ins and outs of that work, we could do a separate video on the subject, because I do have a pretty good method for doing cheap and easy stop motion animation in Dreams, at least relatively easy. Stop motion is always going to be a little painstaking just by its nature, but I found a pretty good solution to it. For now, though, that's pretty much all I can think of to talk about. I guess we could talk about the retake button, which basically eliminates all the animations. It's not really super important. You can also power these off individually if you want to. And you could possibly use a keyframe to power them off at different times when you please. There's also this solo row, which basically only powers one segment of the animation. Let's go ahead and, I guess, demonstrate that. Set it to it's just going to look like its foot. But if you wanted to single out a certain animation, that's a good way to do it. You can also easily select an entire row by pressing X on these little things here. And there is a thing that displays what part you animated. And you can even, I think, change the color. I forgot how you do that. Change color was appearing a little while ago, but I forget how you do that. I don't even know why you would want to change the color, but I guess maybe for memorization. You can kind of see it popping up there, so I don't know what that's about. Anyway. Yeah, we've currently got it on stop motion blend type. It said it's normal linear blend. And then there's empty footage, which basically just resets every frame so that there's no longer footage. Which means you have the recorded position, but you could maybe put new things in that recorded position that weren't previously there, while still maintaining the, you know, structure and difference in timing that the original animation had. But that's pretty much it. That's everything about the action recorder. I mean, there's a few things besides this, but I mean, probably. I think there's also a way to make, like, just to demonstrate. Let me turn this off and talk about this thing. Just grab these things real quick with R2. Pull them into a big pile or something. And we're going to want to make him non-movable and non-collidable so that it'll be easier to animate and move around. But that's basically the animation we're working with here. And we'll set it to play once and keep changes. And you'll notice it just, you know, stays like that. But you could actually reverse this if you wanted to. Like if you wanted everything to be busted apart and then like resume its proper position. Pressing reverse is a good way to do that. I just want to talk about that real quick. It's not super important. Anyway. That's all there is on the action recorder. Hopefully you found this helpful and illuminating. And if you're a budding animator, I would say that Dreams is actually pretty easy to use. So, you know, get to it if you want to, of course. I guess you won't get as much attention as if you did it in Unreal, but at least it's easy to use and also easy to pick up. That's another aspect of Dreams that's highly, you know, useful to the common person if you're not highly technical and don't know about all the ones and zeros of code and whatnot. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.